schedule. It's another slide we've seen many times before. So changes from the last time we presented in September in red text. Key things to note here, the estimated construction cost continues to drop due to value engineering efforts and reductions in anticipated material costs. So usually we see construction costs climb at this stage as we approach the construction bid, but the latest estimate has the construction contract at approximately $10.7 million, which brings the overall total project cost, which is in the top left of the slide, down to around $15.5 million. It's obviously good news, and it also means that we are still keeping tight to that anticipated return on investment in 2028, despite the schedule slippage. Next slide, please. So I just want to take a moment here just to highlight how the cost estimate has changed in the last year. The numbers here all refer to the total anticipated project cost, which includes design, construction management, pre-procurement, and the actual construction costs. So in January, we received the 30% design estimate as part of the preliminary design report. It was a class 5 estimate at the time, and it had a 30% contingency baked in to represent a level of uncertainty in that. Normally, as design proceeds, we see the estimated construction cost, actual construction cost increase, and the contingency decreases as that estimate becomes tighter, resulting in usually the overall estimate staying roughly the same or slightly. In March, for the fiscal year budget, West Basin staff took that 30% design cost estimate and revised it, removing the operation of the temporary dewatering centrifuges from the contractor scope and back onto the contract operator. So obviously, while, as we've written here, this is a project saving of $3.2 million, the costs won't actually be fully saved as they've been moved into the operating budget rather than the CIP budget. The bulk of that cost will now be paid to the contract operator to manage the system as they currently manage our solar system. But in addition, a decision to pre-procure certain materials, such as the steel tanks, have led to savings of approximately $600,000 due to the reduction in contractor markup and overhead. In April, just after the fiscal year budget was submitted to the board, we received the 60% design cost estimate from Arcadis. This saw another reduction due in part to updated material costs. It's something we've been seeing across the industry as supply chains finally return to normal. And in addition, the construction manager quotes came in significantly under the estimated cost of approximately $2 million. So usually, as I'm sure you know, CM costs are approximately 10 to 15% of the estimated construction cost. However, the CMs that bid on this contract saw that not only will the construction cost estimate likely go down over time, but also the actual construction on the project was relatively simple. It's mostly consisting of like-for-like replacements. There's minimal groundwork, minimal civil engineering, and relatively few major challenges. In June, staff received the 90% design estimate, which reflected some value engineering efforts to save approximately $400,000. The estimate also saw the knock-on effects of these cumulative cost savings on estimated markups, such as contingency, mobilization efforts, general conditions, profit and overhead, etc. And finally, we get to our latest estimate, taken from the 100% design cost estimate, where we saw material costs fall again by approximately $400,000, and also the impacts of our 3 constructability reports realized further value engineering savings of around $300,000, bringing us to our current total project estimated cost of $15.5 million. So overall, the total project cost this year has reduced by just over $8 million. Obviously, around $3 million of that is just being moved from our capital budget over to operating. But about $600,000 has been saved by pre-procuring equipment, and about $700,000 has been saved through value engineering. Next slide, please. So over the last few months, staff have returned regularly to recommend approvals for pre-procuring major components in this project. These pre-procurements were recommended by the design engineer for components with minimal risk and long lead times that might impact the construction schedule. So procuring these items, having the district procure these items also provides an added benefit of saving the district a significant expense of profit, overhead, and other margins that a contractor would charge for them to procure this equipment. This month, staff is returning for the last of these pre-procurement items. So as you can see from the green highlighted box here, staff is recommending the approval to procure component and spare parts for the refurbishment of the plate and frame filter presses from the original equipment manufacturer, or the OEM of the presses. So these are in-kind replacements of highly specialized custom manufactured equipment for the presses And so they need to be sole sourced from Universal Filtration, which is the only US representative of press manufacturer. This representative is the only US vendor licensed to manufacture or supply these goods, and they were the same vendor that originally installed the presses at ECL in 1995. Since then, they've provided invaluable support to both Westbase and our contract operator when issues have arisen with this complex and relatively rare in the US piece of equipment. Just under 50% of the total cost of the goods is for US manufactured components made under license by Universal Filtration, while the remaining goods all coming from the OEM in Germany. Due to their key knowledge, district staff are also recommending the procurement of limited professional services from Universal Filtration for technical support during bidding, construction, and post-construction. This will be the final set of district procured equipment for this project, bringing the forecast pre-procurement total to just under $2.1 million. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned on the last slide, staff are recommending the sole source procurement of goods and services from Universal Filtration, the only US representative of the press's original equipment manufacturer. So I mentioned most of the reasons for this recommendation on the previous slide. I'll also add in, though, that Universal Filtration are contracted by all the organizations currently using this type of press in the US, and they are considered the foremost expert in these systems with excellent references from their other customers. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a list of just some of the main components being procured under this recommended contract. As I mentioned, these components are in-kind replacements of the components that are currently fitted to the presses. As you can see, this list is pretty extensive. It consists of all the components required to refurbish these presses. And the intent here is to extend the useful life of the presses by 10 to 15 years. With the procurement of spare parts as well under this contract, staff hopes that these presses won't need any major maintenance nor external support for many years to come. Our design team at Arcadis have regularly reviewed the quotes provided by Universal Filtration to ensure that their prices match expectations, and we are certain that the quoted costs are not arbitrarily inflated nor taking advantage of the sole source element. Next slide, please. As mentioned, staff are also procuring certain limited professional services from Universal Filtration. So these services will consist of assistance during construction bidding. So if any of the contractors have questions concerning kind of the technical details about refurbishing these presses that Westbase staff can't answer, we'll be able to reach out to Universal Filtration's expertise. It will also consist of approximately 6 site visits during construction for the team at Universal Filtration to both instruct the contractor on some of the finer points of refurbishing these presses, but also provide specialist inspection support to our construction management team. And then finally, 2 site visits at the conclusion of the project to train our contract operators on how to use this refurbished system. Next slide, please. So this slide depicts the anticipated expenditure on this project in each fiscal year. The major addition here this month has been the fiscal year 2026-2027 column. We've known for a few months now that the construction costs will spill into the first half of the fiscal year 2027. But this is the first time we're presenting the forecast expenditure. So I've already discussed most of the changes in estimated costs here. But the last major thing to point out is that kind of contrary to our current fiscal year budget, we now anticipate the project expenditure to be much less concentrated in a single year and more spread out across the next few years. So this should make district budgeting easier. And despite the project schedule slipping, we are still anticipating a return on investment in late 2028 for this project, due to the anticipated O&M cost savings of around $3 million per year, which will actually begin during the construction phase of the project as we're taking the presses offline. Next slide, please. This slide is one we present every time. It shows the total anticipated and received refinery funding under the current agreements. There have been no changes here since last time we presented, so I'll move on. Next slide, please. And that brings me to the recommendation for you today. Staff recommends that the board authorize the general manager to undertake a sole source procurement of goods and services from Universal Filtration Incorporated for a total of $934,103, with a 10% contingency of $93,410, for a total not to exceed amount of $1,027,513 plus taxes. And with that, my presentation is finished. I have to take any questions.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Director Williams, any questions or comments?
Yes, just one question. Where does our We can stand on the sole source issue.
In this situation, they're fine with it.
It's indicated that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
In this process, when this was moved forward by the board, it was identified that there would be pre-procurement of certain equipment, especially since there were very many sources. We were basically rebuilding an existing piece of equipment. And I had been blessed at that time and agreed to, the board approved the pre-procurement process on a sole source basis.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, a couple of comments and we can move on. One, thank you very much for continued efforts on lowering the cost for the overall project. It will be interesting to have a project come in under the original estimated cost. So now we just have to state the new number that you have to meet is the number you present today, and if it comes over that, then you're over budget, which is your standard. And one minor comment on the table on page 18. You had a couple of slides back. The pre-procurement is 1,027,000, not 1,030,000.
Sir?
On the pre-procurement there, it shows 1,037,000, but we're approving is 1,027,000. Or,
Correct. Yeah.
okay. Round up there. Then, my general comment is, I know we're moving forward with this project. It's a big investment on rebuilding a piece of equipment. Probably would not be what we use today if we were designing this. And given where we may end up with alternatives, we may or may not have made a wise investment here, and this may end up being a stranded investment I have in the past. Not supported this and will continue not to support it. So with that, if Director William concurs, we will move it forward to the board without a committee recommendation.
I concur.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next item. Laboratory services to adjust contracts now. Mr. General Manager.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this begins on packet page 22, and for the presentation, we have Jamie Malpede, our water quality and environmental compliance supervisor.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, Chairman Alvarez and Director Williams. Here today to present agenda number 5.2, amend agreement for laboratory services to adjust contract amount. This can be found in your packet on page 22. West Basin Municipal Water District currently has 2 agreements for general chemistry, analytical, courier, and reporting services, which expired December 31st, 2024. These are with WEC Laboratories and with Griffin's Eaton Analytical. New contracts with these laboratories were recently approved. As the current contracts are closed out, a reconciliation of the contracts with the fiscal year 2024/2025 budget determined that the contract with WEC needs to be adjusted in order to pay the final invoice of this contract, which is expected in January 2025. You may recall that in May 2024, funds were reallocated between the agreements since a majority of the compliance samples were sent to WEC due to quality control and quality assurance incidents at another laboratory. During the end of the calendar year, budget to actuals tracking, a deficit on the WEC contract was noticed. 2 factors contributed to this deficit. Analysis performed by WEC in 2021 that should have been charged to a previous WEC contract were inadvertently paid from the current contract instead. As a result, the new 2022 contract was charged an unaccounted for amount of $16,650,000. The second factor is funding for the reimbursable purveyor potable well monitoring program was not included in the calculation when determining the WEC contract amount adjustments. Over the course of the contract, the purveyor program was charged $15,584. While this is reimbursed to West Basin from the cities of Manhattan Beach and Inglewood, the funds were not allocated to the lab contract, creating a second deficit. As a result, West Basin compliance staff requests an amendment to the WEC contract in the amount of $32,234. The total program budget still remains the same. Staff has made internal quality control adjustments to ensure budgeted amounts are properly allocated and transitioning contracts are paid accordingly. I will now read the recommendation that the board authorize the general manager to add $32,234 to the agreement with WEC, adjusting the not to exceed amount to $694,648.50. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Director Williams, any question?
Oh, I was waiting for you.
I have no questions on this one, so with Director Williams' concurrence, we will move this forward.
With that, I concur.
Okay,
Thank you.
so we will move on to the ratification of the recycled water pipe repairs at Melinda McDonald Carson Regional Water Recycling Plant. Mouthful. Mr. General Manager.
Yes, thank you. This item begins on packet page 24. Before the presentation, we have Jason Kung, our operations analyst 2.
Thanks, CJ. Good afternoon, directors. On August 30th of this year, a critical leak occurred on the 30-inch recycled water microfiltration MF effluent line at the Carson plant, impacting water production for the Marathon refinery. Veolia, under West Basin's direction and critical procurement policies, responded immediately to execute necessary repairs. The failure was traced to a high-density polyethylene HDPE cap similar to an issue repaired in April, but located approximately 50 feet east on the same header. Temporary repairs were completed by Innovative Engineering and Maintenance on that same day, restoring service until a permanent fix could be implemented. Permanent repairs were completed on September 12th by Core & Main in collaboration with Innovative Engineering, and the repairs involved electrically fusing a coupling, reducer, and flange onto the existing 30-inch pipe and installing a new 24-inch stainless steel blind flange to restore normal operations. The repair costs totaled $84,166.58, including the $44,939 from Innovative and $30,209 from Core & Main, with a 12% markup by Veolia per the operations agreement, as detailed in Table 2 on page 26 of your packet. This repair was notably faster and more cost efficient than the April incident due to lessons learned and a streamlined process, taking 2 weeks instead of over a month the first time around, and costing significantly less than the roughly $146,000 spent in April. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions and read the recommendation, which is that staff recommends that the board ratify the expenditures for the critical repair to the 30-inch HDPE pipe at the JMMCR WRP in the amount of $84,166.58. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Director Williams, any questions?
Move staff's recommendation.
I agree, we'll move this forward. Thank you. All right, moving on to contract amendment for the supply and delivery of sodium hydroxide bulk chemicals. General Manager.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, this item begins on packet page 27. And for the presentation, we do have Jeremiah Shea, our operations analyst 1.
Good afternoon, directors. Effective January 1st, 2025, the California Air Resource Board, or CARB, will extend certain air emissions regulations to ocean tanker vessels arriving at terminals in the Port of Los Angeles and the Port of Long Beach. The new regulations, which previously applied only to incoming container, reefer, and cruise vessels, will now apply to all ocean tanker vessels, including those transporting liquid sodium hydroxide to the local ports. This new regulation is resulting in additional CARB compliance and mitigation fees for chemical supply vendors. West Basin's received a request from one of its chemical vendors, North Star Chemical, last month on November 13th, requesting an increase in unit pricing of 0.0023 cents per wet pound, or an equivalent of 0.00766 dollars per dry pound of the 30% sodium hydroxide chemical that West Basin regularly utilizes at our treatment plants. This proposed adjustment is estimated to increase West Basin's annual cost for sodium hydroxide by approximately $8,800 for the current fiscal year 2024 to 2025, or an increase of 0.845% above the original budgeted sodium hydroxide chemical budget. North Star, which submitted the lowest responsive bid following a competitive solicitation process in April 2024, has indicated that the CARB compliance fee was not calculated into their bid price at the time of bidding. Since receiving this notice from North Star, staff has reached out to the other firms which bid on our sodium hydroxide chemical solicitation this year, which were JCI Chemical and Univar, and we requested updated pricing and clarification as to whether or not their bids included this CARB compliance fee. While JCI has not responded yet, Univar has provided updated pricing, and the cost has gone up from their April bid, which leaves North Star still as the lowest responsive bidder, even considering this proposed increase. Staff would recommend that the board authorize the general manager to amend agreement W3131 for the supply and delivery of sodium hydroxide according to the following: for North Star Chemical to supply and deliver full bulk loads of sodium hydroxide at 37 cents per dry pound, plus a CARB compliance fee of $0.00766 per dry pound delivered to ECL, $0.41 per dry pound, plus a CARB compliance fee of $0.0076 per dry pound delivered to the Juanita Millender McDonald Carson Regional Recycling Plant, the Chevron Nitrification Treatment Plant, and the Torrance Refinery Water Recycling Plant, effective January 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2025. I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee has. It is a unique situation with this request from the chemical supplier to modify an existing contract. So we've engaged our legal staff to review the contract and weigh in. And so we did want to provide the recommendation to the board that the expected increase is $8,800 to our current budget. And the other alternative would be the do nothing option and to not accept this fee increase. North Star Chemical has submitted a letter last Friday after this memo went in, stating that in the absence of an agreement on the requested price adjustment, North Star would reluctantly need to take steps to terminate the current agreement. So we have some other options in front of us, but we wanted to provide that information to the community.
Thank you.
Chair Alvarez, if I could add to that, I think staff's done a very good job investigating the other alternatives to just accepting this fee increase. As you heard, we've got alternative pricing from other vendors, which is substantially higher than this increase. We've also posed the question to BBK, our legal counsel, as to whether they feel that the vendor has a right to exit or terminate our contract. And it is a little muddy. Should we decide to decline and they ultimately seek to terminate, there are some situations that we would have to investigate with legal staff and prove that they knew this fee was coming, which of course the CARB board announced it in 2020 and enacted it earlier this year in October. But nonetheless, it would I think threaten to be an elongated process for us to have to figure out whether or not we are in the right by preventing them from trying to terminate the contract. But staff is today prepared for any direction that the committee gives with respect to either pushing back legally, accepting the increase, or even, if so desired, moving to an alternative supply at a higher cost.
Thank you for that. Director Williams, any comments and questions?
I don't know. I'm looking to you for the best alternative here. So, I don't want to pay any more money like everybody else, but is there an alternative that is? Tell me.
I would agree with you. I don't think we ought to have to pay any more money. We do have an existing contract. Our legal team is not here. It probably is more of a legal question, but I understand that within the vendors world, things may have changed, but our contract is a contract, and they're supposed to deliver that. When we do other vendors now, We don't have existing contracts with them, so they're gonna be giving us revised numbers. So you're really not looking at apples and apples, you are looking at the fact that, this, PUD is now in effect. But whether we should absorb it or the vendor should absorb it is a question that should be in the contract. Is the contract a performance contract or not? And things that we'll probably have to wait until tomorrow when general counsel is here to answer the question.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Director. We can queue up BBK to discuss this tomorrow.
Okay. All right, so with that, we will move on to our next item, which is the extension of the recycled water delivery agreement between the West Basin Municipal Water District, the Soil Refining and Marketing Company, and California Water Service Company. Mr. General Manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This item begins on packet page 32. And for the presentation, we do have Eric Owens, our Assistant General Manager.
All right, directors, here today, we are looking at an amendment for our agreement with Tesoro Refining Company to serve both reverse osmosis boiler feed water and nitrified disinfectant tertiary. This amendment is needed because the current contract will expire in mid-January. Staff is actively engaging with Marathon and making, I think, substantial progress towards executing, or I should say, developing a new contract that will be subsequent to the current 25-year contract. The amendment today really seeks to do three things. First is to acknowledge a name change. That facility has been under several owners in the last 25 years. I won't go through the history there. Some of it is in the board memo. But currently, even though we refer to them quite readily as Marathon, the business unit that we would seek to amend the contract for is the Tesoro Refining and Marketing Company. And so you will hear and perhaps even see within this item references to both Tesoro and Marathon, and rest assured is one and the same. The second thing is to extend the contract expiration date through the end of the fiscal year, June of 2025. This will allow the board to synchronize the rates that would be established in the next contract with their rate setting process that would happen, of course, on July 1st. And lastly, it's really just to document and solidify that Marathon will continue to pay the fixed fee that they've been paying for 25 years. If you recall, the original 25-year fixed fee payment was made for the original construction of the facility. While the dollar value is exactly the same for the next 5 months, we are converting that to be called a capital recovery fee. And so Marathon, I think in good faith, has indicated a willingness to continue paying that fixed fee, of course, along with the volumetric rate that they pay, or the commodity rate that they pay through Cal Water. And but they will continue to pay that through this expiration. And of course, we'll define the new terms of the contract within the next couple of months. And so unless there are any questions, I can read the recommendation.
Go ahead, you want questions afterwards.
All right. That the board, recommendation is that the board authorize the general manager to execute amendment number 2 to the current agreement with the Tesoro Refining and Marketing Company, LLC, as provided in attachment A, continuing the supply of reverse osmosis treated and nitrified recycled water to Marathon's Carson Refinery through June 30th, 2025.
Thank you. Director Williams, any questions or comments?
Yeah, what are you gonna do? I don't know. What to the
Well, let me just add, first and foremost, I want to say thank you to West Basin staff led by our Assistant General Manager. The conversations with the Marathon Refinery, I think, started off a little rocky, but I think that we are now headed in a great direction. I also want to say thank you to Cal Water Service Company because they've been very engaged on this issue. And really what we're trying to do is allow for some time. Obviously, the cost of service study has provided us some great insight as far as the services and products that we provide our customers. It gives us a very specific understanding of the total cost that entails to produce and deliver that water. And so now we have something of substance to really talk about with our refineries. So getting to this point has been, I think, a significant step for West Basin Municipal Water District and really sets us up for, I think, a bright future. This amendment here will get us through the fiscal year and allows us to have an open and transparent dialogue with our refinery customers, specifically in this case, Marathon Refinery, to really get them to a better point where they understand exactly the value that we're providing, the work that's entailed as far as delivering that value. And so that's the reason we're here today. This will buy us that time to have those conversations. And again, going back to West Basin's history, if you look at the use of recycled water by customers, it was Director Ed Little that said, a good customer is going to be a happy customer. And so going through this process, I think will allow us to have both good and happy customers and the refiners. So, so that's why we're here today, and I stand behind staff's recommendation.
Thank you.
Comment/question. This is just a 6-month extension to provide additional time to renegotiate the Marathon/Tesoro agreement. And no fiscal impact associated with it, even though part of it now is a fixed fee in terms of the revenue split.
Mr. Chairman, I would say there's a significant fiscal impact because the way we budgeted this year, we only accounted for our existing contracts with those expiration terms. So this fixed capital recovery fee would be considered new revenue.
So it's
Unanticipated.
misunderstood then. Okay, so, all right, so that's all to the good. The last question has to do with the California Water Services Company and their participation in this, which is good and needed. But where are they with respect to the $4 million contribution?
So as you recall, our last conversation, which I believe was here in this committee, California Water Service Company did notify me and state that they intended to withhold that payment until a long-term agreement could be entered into with West Basin, Cal Water Service Company, and the Marathon Refinery. That was a verbal offering, if you will. And I have had a chance to discuss this with California Water Service Company. I let them know some of my concerns as well as the concerns of the committee and board. And they have offered to put that into writing with an agreement for that $4 million contingent upon a long-term agreement. Again, as our Assistant General Manager said, I think we're headed in the right direction. I think tremendous progress has been made. We anticipate a long-term agreement being entered into prior to the fiscal year. So we would receive that agreement with California Water Service Company. We've never had a written agreement for that $4 million. Well, we've had agreements from the past, but this will cement that. And again, having spoken with California Water Service Company, they've given me their word that they intend to invest that $4 million in this project, but we need to meet that one requirement.
All right, so 2 comments. You don't need to respond. With the extension of the agreement, June of 25, that's a long-term extension. And at that same time, Cal Water Services has indicated verbally that they will then make the $4 million contribution as they promised back in 2017 or whenever they promised to make that contribution.
I'll just add, I know you said no comments needed. They have provided me a draft agreement. So I have legal counsel reviewing that now. And yes.
Thank you. With that, we'll move this to the board.
In agreement.
So moving on, we will now have the information calendar and first of the monthly operations report.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. As always, we have our tremendous operations team here for this presentation. It'll be led by Uzi Daniel, Manager of Operations, Susanna Lee, our Manager of Engineering, Jamie Malpete, our Water Quality Environmental Compliance Supervisor, and Frank Fuchs, our Operations Supervisor.
Thank you, EJ. Good afternoon, directors. Start off with our little recap of last month. Um, every year never fails around the Thanksgiving holiday. We get some deterioration of influent water quality. People like to talk about the Super Bowl flush, but we have a tryptophan flush. And it just for some reason occurs, and I talked to other wastewater treatment plants. So staff was great at working on that, but to save some of the membranes, had to reduce barrier flow, but we're back up. And I believe Susanna will talk about how we've come back up and worked that out with the county. In addition, we had a couple of power outages, one at Hyperion Pump Station. It had to be done manually, but the generator did work. So it prevented us from having to notify all our customers and shut anyone down. So that's always great news, even though it does take a lot of work. All the AQMD hours were recorded, good to go. And at Torrance, we also had a power failure that staff worked on the holiday to get repaired and back up and going. Staff this last month has continued to work on a few leaks. We're reviewing a number of leaks that have happened on 170th Street in Gardena. We've had some assistance in looking at that. Infomark is helping us with that to see if we can figure out if it's a coincidence or there's a long-term solution for that. In addition, some of the big work that's happening at the chargers, their training, which I believe they call the Bolt. There's some perhaps, and Frank will get into that a little bit more, some construction debris that might be in that pipeline, working on being able to get them to be able to flush that and get the recycled water resumed there as well. For the compliance team, we got a lot of the quarterly reports, annuals, a lot of those surcharges in. And in addition, the team has been attending some more local meetings. We have a great group that helps us with federal and state regulations. But sometimes if we're not staying involved with local groups, we forget that sanitation districts, AQMD, they also need to adjust their budgets and revenue. And so it's good for us. We've been engaging to make sure that we're involved and have a voice at the table with other water industry. If there are some regulations or fees that are changing, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. In the presentation is where I was offered if you'd like to continue on to the presentation.
If we could just have a brief presentation, we're trying to move this along pushing. I do have one question before we go on the Hyperion Pump Station power outage. There was a power outage, but the pump station continued to work, transfer switch, moved, turned on the emergency generator, and there was no loss of performance. Or was there some temporary?
The generator did turn on, but there was the automatic transfer switch did have a failure that did not allow automatic transfer. So we're working with Eaton, our vendor, to get the replacement part. But there was a brief moment about roughly less than about 30 minutes until staff went on site to suit up and then do the manual transfer.
Okay, so the automatic transfer switch failed, basically, if I can understand you. We have other emergency generators in other facilities.
We have one small one at the ECL, which power up the control room area admin building. And then with the new CMF phase 2 project, we also have a backup generator.
So the comment is, yeah, we tend to take for granted the transfer switches, but it seems like something that merits more frequent inspection and maintenance.
Yeah, we're working with the vendor because we've been talking with Eaton that this particular model has been having problems, like Jason, and unfortunately, we are just trying to get more of the spare parts just on hand so we can be able to switch them. And we want to also test the automatic transfer switch more often, like you said, to get those PM and make sure that it works when it needs to work.
I would encourage that we do more frequent testing and maintenance on it. Because this happened during more or less regular hours. So it was easy to respond.
It happened at 6:30 a.m. when the drunk driver hit the pole. And so it.
But we had staff here at 6.
But it was on a Saturday,
Oh.
yeah, so we did have to call out staff.
Chair Alvarez, to your point, we can work with the contract operator to review their preventative maintenance schedules and what sort of testing they're doing or what frequency that looks like, and make sure that for all of those switches, that we are inspecting them with some regularity.
Earlier this year, we did just test out the ATS and everything worked out during the testing. So we are trying to schedule those more frequent testing with the ATS, knowing there's been issues in the past.
Okay. Thank you. Keep going.
Then if we want to roll in the presentation is if you'd like to keep it brief, some of it's the usual suspects, so maybe you just roll through and then if you want to stop.
Maybe we can just focus unless Director Williams has some additional questions just on the performance of the Hyperion plant. And basically how it's impacting our operations, enable our ability to produce or not produce water
On the
as we
Hyperion
intend.
incident?
Hmm?
Did you say on the Hyperion incident?
Not the Hyperion incident, just Hyperion production and how it's impacting our operations, as you know.
The water.
It's your
quality.
usual.
Okay,
Good.
the water quality. Okay, we go to the production. For the month of November, I'll just go through quickly if you have into the finance. FNA, I think you saw similar graph already, so we were doing well in November for the most part. If we go to the next slide, in summary, we're about 3% under compared to budget. So next slide, comparing around all the different process, we're doing pretty good compared to the previous year. Next slide. So here's the very pretty picture that shows what happened in November on the Thanksgiving impact. So on the left, that is the basket strainer that catches all our nice inflow water ahead of the MF system. So basically what that impact was that it clogged all our basket strainers. So which these basket strainers right by the ozone contact basin, it requires a lot of maintenance work. It needs a crane to lift out, unbolt, and then so that required us to reduce area productions to about 5 mgd. So that was the major impact on that water quality event. And we were able to clean those basket strainer throughout the whole weekend. So you can see the bottom right corner that photos, that's what a clean basket strainer looks like. To help us to meet the annual production, so we are continuing with the phase 5 MF replacement. So we're on our last 2 units of the 8. So we should have plenty of MF productions to meet this year's barrier budgeted amount. So there are other couple of maintenance repair that was needed to help us to boost and the reliability of the barrier and the ECL production. So next slide. You can go, yeah, so as you can see on the far right, there's where the turbidity that just spiked up. We have a day as maximum about 45 NTU, where the normal average turbidity is about 12 to 15. So for the month of November, it ended about 17 NTU. And TSSY, the next slide is really, we also had a spike, obviously. Next slide. You saw that it went all the way up to like 60 TSS. So 40 TSS, sorry. But for the most part now, we have been come back down to the average, and our turbidity is about like 12 to 15 back to the normal range. That's the performance in terms of influent water quality. As I mentioned, we are finishing the final 3 units of MF replacement. So we should be able to increase our barrier project injections to the barrier, West Coast barrier. We just have a brief discussion with the county. We should be able to inject up to 14 MGD. We are right now at around 11.5. We just increased today to 11.5 MGD. Looking forward in January, mid-January, as part of the phase 5 SCADA project upgrade, we will be requiring about 5 weeks of shutdown on the phase 5. So obviously that will impact January and part of February barrier production. That's all.
So when we shut down, are we shutting down all the way or just partially?
With phase 5 down, we can have about roughly around 3 MGD of barrier going to the barrier, because the rest we need to continue to supply for the Chevron. Chevron takes about 67 MGD of MF filtrates to meet their demand.
So our imported water sales will be making that up in January, February. Thank you.
Go on to the rest. This is the last of the productions.
I think we're good. Okay.
Nothing else. So that brings us to the monthly engineer report. This item begins on page 96. And for the presentation, again, we have a team, Barca Maserlian, our Executive Manager of Engineering Operations, Veronica Gobea, our Engineering Supervisor, Susanna Lee, Manager of Engineering, and John Benner, our Engineer 2.
Thank you, Jay. Directors will start with the look at next month on packet page 1 or 2 items that are coming to the committee, projected items. One is related to the PV lateral project. This our CM services contract. It's been a few months. We've been going back and forth with the CM services consultant. We rejected a couple of proposals that they had for additional funding. The project has been delayed for a few months, and they're requesting additional amounts for their services. Like I said, we rejected a couple of them. We are coming closer to what we think is might be appropriate, but we haven't finalized that yet. We're hoping that that would be finalized and we come back to the committee with a recommendation. But we also planning on presenting a recommendation regarding the solicitation for the bulk chemical storage condition set, as well as for the procurement of RO membranes for 4 barrier trains, train 1, 3, 10, and 11. Those quotes are due to come in January 7th. And lastly, we hope to have another informational item. Last month or the month before, we talked a little bit about the climate change plan. We just received the final report with a few recommendations for the district. So we're hoping to come back and share that information with the committee next month. Moving forward, we can give you the 10-minute presentations by staff, or I can give you a 2-minute overview as well.
Or why don't we do the 8-minute? Because I know Director Williams will be needing to leave at 2.
So
a quick update on the other sorties and where we are. She should be moving along pretty well in the pump station and so on.
Yes, so the pump station, I think it's a typical construction that you pass by, there's nothing happening now, it's still building. So right now, they are at 12 feet high on the masonry, so they're, moving along pretty quick. The projected schedule right now, we are reviewing any impact from any permits that prevented us from moving. So we're reviewing that information. So right now, our best guess estimate right now is sort of from March, April, but again, we're still finalizing that review. On the pipeline, There's under page 107. That's basically the remaining item that we have standing. You can move to, I believe, page 107. Next slide. Next. Okay, so this particular slide like shows everything that has been installed, completed, and you can see that red bullet item that is basically the master meter that is still under construction. And you can go to the next slide. I can show you the reason for that. So as part of the powering of that particular structure, we are connecting to a SDE transformer. And on the right-hand side, you can see a photo, and there's like a couple of circles with a P and a number. So what I meant by that is like pole number 1, pole number 2. So originally we were supposed to connect to pole number 2. And when we went to the field, that particular road, which is called the Torrance Utility Road, but it's within the city of Palo Verde Estates, was getting some erosion. So you can actually see through several utilities that have been placed before us underground. So SCE came into the site and looked at that particular location along with a tree that is pretty close to our master meter, which is on the left-hand side, you see like a big circle of, and I apologize for my lack of aesthetic on drawing trees, but the green circle was to symbolize a tree. And basically the city of Palos Verdes Estates, along with SE, they wanted us to move that alignment to stay as far as we can from the tree. So the plans for the electrical conduct, which is something that SE provided, were reviewed by SE, and basically they finally came out to a new design. And what the design will change is like instead of connecting ourselves to pole number 2, we're going to connect to a new pole that is on dots that SE is going to be installing. We did look at pole number 1, but unfortunately that particular pole is already packed with utilities, so there's no additional room for another transformer or power from there. So basically right now we're just like in the process of finalizing the remaining items to complete that installation. So right now we're looking like around like January to be completed with all the stuff. Contractors already coordinating with SCE, and we're finalizing some paperwork with SCE. So as for the pipeline on what the remaining work is, there's miscellaneous punch list items which are very minor, but again, it's in the process of being completed along with this. For the pump station, you can follow me to maybe.
Veronica, could I
Yes.
ask, are these absolutely necessary for the board to hear today?
No, I think the best item is like pump station trophy.
So the only question is budget-wise,
Mhm.
you're still okay, or?
Yeah, on the construction, yes, we're fine. In regards to construction management, I feel like there might be some, and I don't want to speak yet until all the numbers are finalized, but there might be some credits that we get back and might be
What
actually.
are your credits back?
Yeah, do
That's
that.
amazing. Thank
So,
you.
so let's, let's keep our, as long as we're moving forward, but at least I think it's balanced, and hopefully, once we finalize the conversation with the CM, hopefully we can balance. I don't want to promise anything, but that's what we're trying to aim for.
The credits being on the contractor side, not the CM services.
Are we about done?
Unless you'd like to hear more about the phase 2 expansion project and DCS, to touch on those.
Mark, maybe you could just mention the acceptance test completion date.
Yeah, on the phase 2 expansion project, the acceptance testing was completed on November 22nd. But there's a few.
So testing is complete and accepted?
Correct. They submitted a report, and the review of the report has not been accepted, but the testing itself has been. We still have some comments and questions on the reporting, so there are some administrative items. but the contractor is still responsible for drawings, as-built drawings, asset lists, things of that nature that they still have to submit, punch list items as well. So those type of things, they move their trailer. We're sharing one trailer now. Contractor sharing with the CM services, but so few items left, but we're scheduled to have the project complete. Hopefully, we're really pushing to get the paperwork done, have them submit whatever's left to submit. We're scheduled to do a celebration for the project on January 9th. That has been put on the books.
So on January 9th or before that date, we will issue a notice of completion.
Not guaranteed. It depends on how well they respond to our requests in the next couple of weeks for the holidays. So I wouldn't bank on that. That it's going to be issuing notice of completion before January.
Thank you.
In true West Basin fashion, Director, we are going to celebrate the opening of that and the taking of water, but we still have some time before we can truly call the project complete.
Yeah, but by all means, I mean, our contract operator right now is operating the system. It's not the.
We have beneficiaries.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And lastly, on the DCS, we posted the RFP on December 12th. Where pre-proposal meeting is scheduled for the 9th, and we're supposed to get proposals on February 6th. That has moved forward as promised.
And it's 2:00.
Thank you very much.
Great job, everyone.
With that, I don't believe we have any closed session item. Unless Director Williams has any
I
comments.
don't have
We
any.
don't have any additional director comments. And so we are adjourned and we will meet again next month, January 15th or another time. The time of the meeting is appreciated. Okay, thank you all.
Short and short.